I don't often talk about politics in the sermon. I spoke up when the World Trade Center was attacked. I focused on Iraq when we were about to invade. I've probably spoken more about what I see as moral issues, equal rights for people, poverty, homelessness, that sort of thing that tend to arise in a political context, but really have other associations with the scripture, teaching of the church. I believe that our religious faith, our spiritual life, is certainly a foundation for our choices and our use of power, however we express it. But I try to focus on laying the foundation rather than on the particular choices. Our tradition has had to contend with all sorts of political situations, positive and negative, persecutions, not persecutions, supports, co-opting from the Roman Empire through the Middle Ages, the Renaissance and the Reformation, American experiment, American church, over thousands of years, really. So it's diminishing, really, I think, to over-identify the beliefs of the church with one particular political or cultural system of preferences that are limited by time and geography. There are certain givens, I think, in Christian tradition that I suppose narrow down the choices that we make about what we do and how we act. We believe, for example, that God's world has no borders, no boundaries to it. That there's no difference in value for God from one place to another place, one group of people to another group of people, from one individual person to another individual person. We also, as Christians, are called, especially by Jesus, to maybe give more help to those who need more help. The poor, the sick, the lost, the stranger, than to those who are privileged and powerful who don't need that sort of help. And I think it's a part of our particular expression of Christianity that unless our personal call is to be a hermit of some sort or withdraw into a more inner-focused life, we are called to care about the world that we live in, to be involved in some way to make the connection between our life in the world and our life with God, which is really to be political, to be moral, to make choices and to act on them. All those basics, I think, seem to me to be particularly important at this time in our history, and the church at large has given that indication as well. But I worry that rather than our spiritual life and in religious sensibilities manifesting in our politics have started to take on the importance of a religion for a lot of people. So anger and fear and distrust and conflicting values, conflicting visions of the truth, disrespect for differences, dehumanization of opposition, all seem to be rising in a way that appears to be what people are ultimately concerned about and what drives their lives and values. Those who disagree with each other have now become enemies. Compromise is considered to be betrayal. Intensity of feeling overwhelms thought, like it does when people are caught up in a crusade of some sort. Black and white thinking leaves no middle ground, no nuance, no options. It's only good versus evil, and it varies what you think is what is good and what is evil. Now we're horrified when we see the results of that kind of passion in something like ISIS or the mullahs of Iran or in a different way in North Korea. But we may be heading there ourselves. I went to a diocesan leadership training in Salinas yesterday that focused on dealing with difference and talked about, in some ways, this the idea of superiority, inferiority, and the divisions that it causes, and how to deal with that sort of thing within the church. So, thinking about this all week, really, though, with the lessons we have and the events that take place, a couple things emerged as maybe important ways to look at these things. I was watching the news the other day, and somebody said it was when they were having that Senate debate over closing the government or not closing the government, or funding the government or not funding the government, and one of the commentators said, would Thomas Jefferson recognize this? And I started thinking about Jefferson, and I thought about the story that at an event that honoring Nobel Prize winners of the Western Hemisphere, President Kennedy is reported to have said, I want to tell you how welcome you are here at the White House. I think this is the most extraordinary collection of talent, of human knowledge that has ever been gathered together at the White House, with the possible exception of when Thomas Jefferson dined alone. So I was thinking about that, and in relationship to the polarizations and growing self-certainty of our political divisions. And I thought about a play that I had seen by the playwright Robert Penn Warren, entitled Brother of Dragons. And it's about Jefferson and about Jefferson's nephews. I think it's a true story. The nephews, after suffering setbacks in Virginia, had gone west to Kentucky, and they worked a small farm there and had a few slaves. And when one slave named George broke a vase that one of the brothers especially liked, they murdered him. And they dismembered him. And they burned him in the fireplace, forcing their other slaves to watch and clean up afterwards. And in the play, the scenes cut between their cabin on one side of the stage, their cabin, and that, what's going on there, to the other side. The light would fade on that side, and the other side would light up, and you'd see Jefferson in his study at Monticello. Speaking about the high ideals of our government and his intent for our nation and the enshrinement of those ideals in the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights that he helped bring about. And also in the play he was writing some love poetry. Quite a contrast. And the contrast was not meant to portray two sides opposed to each other, with one clearly right and the other heinously evil, or to point out the different ways that a family can go, having made different choices or experienced different things. It was meant to show really the divisions within each person's heart and soul, or each group's soul, or a nation's community consciousness, two sides of a coin that can be separated in spite of their difference. And I think the recognition of that is important if we're to find our way out of the deeper shutdown in our country and in our lives, as well as in government, if we're ever to have hope for Nineveh. See, it's when precisely the other side, whoever is on the other side, is disowned, is denied, is dehumanized, is objectified, repressed, and projected upon, that the fear and anger rise unchecked. And we end up creating the very thing that we fear. And we end up doing the very things we hate. See, really any war is a civil war or involves a civil war. A war within the self, whether it's a personal self or national self, or family self, or congregational self. It's a negative sacrament, you could say, an outward and visible sign of some inward and spiritual dis-ease, disgrace. Such wars, such conflicts can never be won. I mean, anybody who's been married and has won an argument with their spouse knows that. They can only be healed, transcended into a greater wholeness. Or not, I guess. I guess what I mean by that, for example, is that the intensity of feeling in those people who opposed President Obama and almost everything he did showed, along with making judgments based on political understanding, showed that they were seeing in him some manifestation of some unresolved parts of themselves that they couldn't or wouldn't accept or integrate. That's what the passion behind it shows. And the intensity of feeling of those who oppose President Trump show that he also is the bearer of unintegrated conflict and projected shadows that overcome thought and any practical or reasoned judgment. I think we all experience this. I know I experience it, sometimes to a distracting degree. I'm considering giving up watching any media news for Lent to try to get back to some kind of spiritual grounding. And understanding this doesn't get us off the hook for making, one would hope, reasoned political and moral choices. And taking sometimes strong and even radical political and moral action. In fact, understanding that level, that projected level of emotion and intensity may help us accomplish those political and moral goals, because the energy that goes into all that emotional reaction and rage can be redirected into real issues in the real world. Not just those things that go around in our brain, those arguments, those comments. As Christians, we're not supposed to go around crucifying other people. We're supposed to carry our own cross, whatever that may be. And part of loving the poorest and welcoming the stranger involves realizing our oneness with those whose views we may find intolerable. I have really strong political opinions, and while I may not preach about that sort of thing much, I have felt at times called to put whatever moral authority I have as a Christian clergy person on the side of what I think is right, and I'll also freely share, less lofty opinions in other situations. But I pray that when I do that, I can always do that with love rather than hate. With a recognition of the humanity of everyone who may be on whatever side. And that's the second point that I want to make, besides that sort of inner connection that we have around these times. As many of you know, I have developed a rather special feeling for my granddaughter Eleanor, Nori, who will be 2 years old next month. I mean, I love my own children and Molly's children, and it's been great having grandsons, the 3 grandsons. But maybe because as a parent you have a whole bunch of different roles and responsibilities that mix in with that, and with the boys, there's no father figure living in the house, so there's the same sort of conflicted stuff or multiple demands made on that relationship I have with them. But with Nori, it's just pure love. I have a sense of awe and wonder and just pure appreciation for this certainly, obviously very cute and extremely intelligent child who reaches out to be picked up by her opa and shows me how to get to the stuff she likes on YouTube. Not too yet. I'm smitten, I guess. I think she's amazing. I think she's a miracle. I think in her I see God's creation as it's intended to be, blossoming without all the overlay of whatever happens to us. So I'm going to try, maybe along with backing off needs, I'm going to try at least during Lent, and I hope beyond that, to work to see in each person I encounter, each person in the world that I walk around in, people on the street, servers bringing food to my table at a restaurant, the president, the senators, the Congress people, the talking heads on television, the screaming people out in the street, on every side, as well, of course, as my family and you all each. I'm going to try to see that same spark of miracle, that center of love that I see and experience in Nori. It's there. I know it's there. It's there in everyone. It's how God sees you. It's how God sees everyone. And you may not know Nori. It'd be easier if you did, because she's really so cute and so obviously intelligent and loving. But you've had someone, I'm sure, sometime in your life like that you love, at least in your imagination, maybe. So use that feeling. Find that feeling. And then see it in everybody you see. If we can do that, maybe just starting with us. The 8 o'clock group brought into it. If we can do that, I think things will begin to change for the better instead of getting worse. And they could get worse. If we can do that, the kingdom of God will be near. Thanks be to God.